Okay, everybody, welcome back into another episode of the Stadium Seat Sports Podcast. As always, my name's Coop here with my partner and co-host Kriv. Just like we do every week, we're going to be recapping the games that we previewed the previous week. And so to just quickly give you what those games are, the first one we're going to start with here is going to be Illinois and Nebraska, which was a Friday night game. So Kriv, if you want to start this one off, I'll throw it over to you, and then I'll give you my thoughts on this game.
Yeah, so for me personally, I really did believe Nebraska was going to pull this off. They probably, or almost definitely, are the more talented team. I thought Raiola looked really good for the most part. He had some questionable throws mixed in there, and that's ultimately what kind of led them to their downfall. Luke Altmaier on Illinois, I mean, that guy was just poised and composed and nothing really fazed him, and it kind of just showed through on the field. So just looking at both quarterbacks, I mean, that's all this came down to. Who was most experienced and who was going to make the least amount of mistakes. And in the end, that was Illinois. Nebraska definitely could have won that game a handful of times, but Illinois just hung in there, took care of business, and never flinched.
Yeah, I mean, hey, shout out to the fighting Brett Bielema, as I tell you. I mean, Illinois is just one of those teams that, they're almost always going to play solid to great defense. But I think you touched on a great point. Like Luke Altmaier looked so poised in the pocket for Illinois. And it's something that he struggled with throughout his collegiate career where he's been too late in delivering the ball. Like I thought in this Friday night game and really so far this season, he has been excellent. And that's part of the reason that Illinois is sitting there 4-0 at this point in time. And, with Raiola, I think back to the one play, I can't remember what quarter it was in. I think it was the third, maybe the fourth, where he had a guy pretty wide open, relatively speaking, in the end zone and just, I believe he underthrew him rather than overthrew him. And I just think back to that, had he hit that pass, and it's one he absolutely wants back, it probably doesn't go to overtime, and Nebraska just wins that outright. And Nebraska, I mean, for such a storied program, I mean, you got to feel for that fan base, man. I mean, what a tortured fan base in terms of losing one possession games and losing against other ranked opponents over the last decade to 2 decades. I mean, that program and that fan base deserves a lot more. And I'm not sitting here telling you I don't think Matt Rule and Dalen Raiola can get it done. I absolutely do. But you got to feel for them. I thought that was a fantastic Friday night game. Absolutely an absolute thriller. We both picked Nebraska in this game. I think, I had mentioned when we were talking about it that I thought the Illini would keep it close. Neither one of us picked them outright. So congratulations to them. They've got a hell of a start to the season, and we'll see what they do from here on out.
Yeah, and I mean that game was pretty exciting. I mean, it was competitive throughout, and this next game was supposed to be a big matchup, and it was really a snooze fest. And that's Tennessee going into Oklahoma and just taking care of business. I mean, this was so lopsided, and I think we both picked Tennessee in this one, and I had Tennessee as my pick of the week at -6.5. And that was stealing money. I mean, they were so far and ahead better than them. Nico, he didn't have the best game, but he was relatively efficient. Once again, Sampson at running back for them, he's a beast. They can just feed him the ball, control the clock, control time of possession, and just move that ball downfield. And I think those two together can kind of grow and continue to become more of a dynamic duo as this season goes on. But for me, the big story is two things. Tennessee's defense just continues to be elite. They have played so well for so long. I know it's only been 4 games, but I mean, they have just been beating up everyone left and right, and really kind of allowing that offense to figure things out as they take care of business. And then for me on Oklahoma, Jackson Arnold was very disappointing. I know he obviously went against a good defense here. But he had 2 fumbles and an interception, and I think I saw right before this recording here is that Michael Hawkins is going to be the starting quarterback next week, and Jackson Arnold has been benched. So,
yeah,
I mean, Jackson Arnold obviously high 5-star recruit, extremely talented. He was leading them in passing and rushing going into this game, and he laid a huge egg. And then if you saw it, I mean, obviously it was at the end of the game and it wasn't really competitive anymore, but Hawkins came in and he moved the ball. He got some points on the board for them. And I think Oklahoma realizes they need to try to get someone in there who's going to not only move the chains, but also take care of the ball. And maybe this is a one game sit for Jackson Arnold, but that's definitely a situation to keep an eye on. But yeah, hats off to Tennessee. They took care of business.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the story in this game for me, and I'll touch on a few different things here, is really both defenses. I mean, you hammered on it. Tennessee's defense has been elite throughout this entire year so far, and that cannot be overstated how important that is because they've got a potent, lethal offense as they bring Nico along. And I say bring him along as if he's not already great. He is. But he has the opportunity to become even better and that offense to become even more lethal. And when you pair it with an excellent defense like Tennessee has, that's fantastic. And you mentioned it. Nico didn't have his best game. He had his worst game of the year, in my opinion, so far in his young collegiate career. But defense travels, and that's exactly what Tennessee's defense did. But I also want to give some credit to Oklahoma's defense. I think Brent Venables has a really good defense within this Oklahoma Sooners team. And I already touched on it. Tennessee is a lethal offense, and Oklahoma, holding Tennessee to 25 points in this game is honestly a very significant step and improvement for them defensively. And also, they gave themselves the opportunity to win this game. When you hold Tennessee to 25 points, you probably think Tennessee lost that football game, just given the fact that their offense is so lethal. If they only scored 25 points, the other team on the other side of the ball gave themselves a real shot to win. And Oklahoma's offense is just so anemic that was just like an absolute door slam in Oklahoma's face. Like, you're not winning this game. We scored 25 points. You mentioned it. Jackson Arnold struggled significantly. I did not see the news about him, being benched. And like you said, maybe it's only for a week as like a wake up call. But I think you look at this team, and when the offense is as anemic as it is, I don't see how you can't make a move to, Michael Hawkins Jr. because you're just not getting it done with Jackson Arnold at this point in time, and you're in for a rude awakening with the schedule they have in the SEC if they continue to play offensively the way that they do. And that's really, kind of too bad because their defense is very good to potentially great and should have them in a lot of games, but the offense is just unable to keep up. I mean, Jackson Arnold had a QBR of 1.3 in this game. And I mean, give credit to Tennessee's defense, but this isn't, the 85 Bears that Tennessee's trotting out there. Like, a QBR of 1.3 is just not good enough, especially for how highly recruited and touted Jackson Arnold was. I don't know if it's just, he's in his own head right now. I think he's got all the talent to be great, but Brent Venables and that offense really need to find their swag to go along with how good their defense has been playing. And if they do that, then Oklahoma could right the ship and they could surprise some people this year. But if they don't, they're in for a long road. So we'll have to keep tabs on how that continues for this Oklahoma team.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good point on Oklahoma's defense. They are a good team, and they showed up as much as they could. But when you're on field the entire game and your quarterback's turning the ball over in bad spots, I mean, you're gonna give up points. So,
right.
Yeah, great call out there. And then the next game here, I think both of us are somewhat surprised, and I think the team that won is probably even surprised, that is USC at Michigan.
Yeah.
And I'll let you kick things off here, but I think this was one of the weirdest games I've ever seen.
Yeah, and look, to any of our listeners who tuned in last week during these picks, I'm prepared to eat my crow because I believe my best pick was USC -5.5 or whatever the spread was when we did our preview of this past weekend's games. I thought USC was going to go into the big house with Miller Moss and that improved defense, and I thought that they were going to be able to handle Michigan and beat them relatively handily, just given the fact that I did not trust that Alex Orji and this Michigan offense would get much going at all. And honestly, for me, John, I don't know what to think about this game. I don't know if I should be impressed with Michigan or more disappointed in USC. Because when you really look at this game, Michigan's run game did get going. Mullings, we've talked about it. He is the guy. He was averaging 9.4 yards per carry in this game. He's absolutely their number one guy. Edwards had a better game where he was averaging 5.3 yards a carry. And Orgy helps with that. But also, it's not like Michigan's offense was lethal by any means. Orgy threw for only 32 yards, an average of 2.7 yards an attempt, and a QBR of 26.7. Like, Orgy was not any better than Davis Warren at quarterback in terms of pure passing ability. He just got the run game going because he is a threat to run himself. But I feel like better teams on their schedule, like Oregon and Ohio State, are just going to spy Orgy as the quarterback if he is the guy at that, at those, points in time down the line here as the season progresses. And it's going to make them very, very beatable. Maybe his passing comes along. I don't, who's to say. But I honestly don't know how to feel about this game if I'm like more impressed with what Michigan did because it's a great win, so give them credit where credit is due. Or if I'm just more disappointed in the game plan Lincoln Riley drew up, how Miller Moss played overall, and just how unprepared they were for what Michigan was going to throw at them, especially given the fact that they knew Orgy was going to be the starter like 5 days before the game started. And we touched on that, where it's like, why did Michigan release that Orgy was going to be the starter? And it's like, they essentially told you their game plan and what they were going to do, and they still punched you in the mouth and beat you exactly how they told you they were going to beat you, which is that smash mouth, hard-nosed football that Michigan is known for, and their D-line really showed up in this game. So I'm really kind of, torn if it's like, give credit where credit is due to Michigan. It was a big win for them. It helps them, as the season goes on, potentially be one of those sleeper playoff teams after the big loss they took to Texas. Or if I'm just like, man, this was a horrible game plan for Lincoln Riley. He did not have this team prepared the way he should have for this game. And had he had them prepared, I think USC could have won handily, which is why that was my pick of the week last week. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts because I'm really torn.
Yeah, so I have a few key takeaways from this game. And I think one of the points you made already, USC knew that this Michigan offense was going to be one-dimensional. I mean, Alex Orgy threw for 32 yards, and they still lost the game. And that is unacceptable on a number of levels. They should have been doing everything possible to get Orgy to try to throw that ball. And it didn't really feel that way. They don't get me wrong, they focused in on the run a bit, but not to the point where they should have gone all out and just forced Orgy to do anything. Yep. So that right there kind of bothered me. Also, this game just seemed like the typical Lincoln Riley big game where they just come up short because he has some sort of deficiency. And that's kind of how it played out. They had the game in hand, and he had made some questionable calls. But I do want to say Michigan's defense was very good. They had 4 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. I mean, that is their bread and butter, and they looked very good. I do think USC is probably not as good as we think, especially after that LSU game. We're like, wow, they beat LSU on a neutral site and all this, and then it turned out that LSU is not very good either. They've barely pulled out multiple games since then. They could easily have 2 to 3 losses right now. They had trouble with UCLA, so in all honesty, USC might not be as back as we thought. That's the dangers of overreacting to early season games. With that said, I think Mullins is an absolute beast for Michigan, and they need that because I know Donovan Edwards had a decent game, but this team is going to go as far as Mullins can carry them on offense, and that's all they have. I mean, that offense is bad. So Michigan, great job pulling out that win. They had a few, honestly, they had a few lucky calls. I remember vividly a horse collar that wasn't called that injured the receiver. So, I mean, they had some things break their way, but that's the name of the game, and they pulled it out when not many people were giving them a chance. So kudos to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next game we'll jump in here is number 12 Utah, taking on number 14 Oklahoma State down in Stillwater. And we were really interested in this game because we couldn't accurately predict this game, and it was all due to the fact that we did not know Cam Rising, was he going to start, was he not going to start. He was a game time decision, and I just got to give credit where credit is due. Cam Rising did not play in this game, and number 12 Utah traveled down to Stillwater to take on number 14 Oklahoma State, and they did it, with quarterback Isaac Wilson, and pulled out the 22-19 victory. And Isaac Wilson honestly didn't have too bad of a day. Like, I know he had the 2 interceptions, but he did have a touchdown. He averaged like 7.1 yards per pass. His QBR was a little over 85. So like overall, given the fact that like he doesn't get too much playing time, especially obviously when Cam Rising is healthy, because Cam Rising is just one of the most, senior quarterbacks we have in college and is a very good quarterback. I thought that he went down into Stillwater in a hostile environment in a tough game, and he played pretty well outside of those 2 interceptions, like I mentioned. But to me, the real shiner in this game is just that hard-nosed Kyle Whittingham defense of Utah. And I think I mentioned it in our preview where I'm just like, defense travels, and that is what Utah and Kyle Whittingham teams are known for, is just that hard-nosed smash mouth. We're going to play excellent defense. And I thought that their defense was really, really good in this game. I mean, that was the highlight for me personally. For Oklahoma State, Alan Bowman, their quarterback, he had 2 touchdowns, but similar to Utah's quarterback, had 2 interceptions. They also played Garrett Rangel in this game. And one of the things that's been really surprising to me, and I haven't gotten to watch too much Oklahoma State, and I didn't watch this game in full, is Ollie Gordon II has really struggled so far this year. And I don't know if it's the fact that maybe Oklahoma State's offensive line is just not getting a push and helping him out, or if he's just missing holes, because he was coming into the season like one of the more touted running backs in all of college football. And I mean, he really struggled in this game. He had 11 carries and only went for 42 yards. So, I mean, he's the hell of a player. And I think, honestly, Oklahoma State, I mean, they have nothing to be ashamed of. They were the number 14 team in the country. They're still sitting there at 3-1. They've still got everything in front of them. But I think if they're going to go as far as Ollie Gordon II takes them, and he's capable of taking them very far, but if he doesn't get going and get back to what his normal is, then Oklahoma State could find themselves, losers in multiple different games throughout this year.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head on a lot of this. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I think the biggest takeaway here, and if you recall, I had Utah as a sleeper top 5 team, and I thought the schedule was pretty favorable for them. Obviously, that was dependent on Cam Rising, but them going on the road and winning this game, I think kind of shifts the needle in a good direction, in my opinion, because they were able to win without the heart and soul of their team. And that just says so much about Whittingham, the culture they have, and the players they have. They play a certain brand of football that can translate into any arena. So whether that be in conference championship games or tough road games, it just works. So very close game. It could have gone either way, but I mean, Utah just stuck to who they are and they pulled it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last game we're going to jump in here is going to be Kansas State traveled up to play BYU. And we touched on this, like going to Lavelle Edwards Stadium, a night game on Saturday, was not going to be easy. And we both were very worried for Kansas State in this game, and with good reason. I mean, give all the credit in the world to BYU. I mean, they absolutely slapped Kansas State 38-9. And when you look at the statistics of this game, Kansas State actually, outgained them in a lot of ways in terms of like the yards per pass, yards per rush. Like, they actually had better statistics than BYU did in a lot of the facets that we look at. But Kansas State was so turnover prone in this game. Avery Johnson had 2 interceptions that he threw. I believe they had 3 fumbles as a team in total. Yep. Like they just absolutely shot themselves in the foot time and time and time again. And BYU, give them all the credit in the world. Like, that's a tough place to play, and they're a pretty solid, disciplined football team. So this was going to be a very difficult ask for Avery Johnson, the young quarterback for Kansas State. He really struggled in this game. Like, I'm still very high on him. I think he's going to be a great college quarterback, but his inexperience really showed in this game. And neither one of us was going to be surprised to see BYU win this game. I will say I was surprised to see the outcome of 38-9. I didn't expect that. I wouldn't have been surprised. I did not make it through this entire game. I'm not going to lie. I would not have been surprised to see BYU having won the game when I woke up the next day. But I did not expect them to win by nearly 30 points. So kudos to them. Heck of an effort. Kansas State, I still believe in them. I still think they can be great. I think Avery Johnson will bounce back, and I'm excited to see what they do the rest of the way.
Yeah, and like you said, we called this as our upset of the week. Obviously, we never would have predicted 38-9.
Yeah.
And I think it is an important call out outside of the 5 turnovers, which of course I would love to see a stat of teams who have turned the ball over 5 times and won a game. I'm sure it's very, very little.
Yeah.
But Kansas State had 228 yards rushing and lost 38-9. That is incredible. That does not make any sense. This is just like Michigan throwing 32 yards passing and winning their game. Weird stuff happens in college football, and
great point.
Honestly, Kansas State plays this game 9 times out of 10, they probably win. And definitely not losing by double digits in any of those. But it was the perfect amount of college football chaos, a night game at BYU. It's as Avery Johnson said, it was a unique environment. He said the fans were almost encouraging him. So little funny jab there, but it clearly threw him off his game. He looked inexperienced. He made a lot of mistakes, and they just did not take care of the football. So at the end of the day, our upset of the week not only won, but they dominated, and I'll take it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a good pick by us, but I think both of us would be lying through our teeth if we said we saw the outcome that happened coming. So that was surprising to both of us. But to everyone that tuned into this video and has tuned into any of our videos, incredibly thankful for you guys. We're going to continue to pump out some good content here and get better and better videos for you guys weekly. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave your comments down below. Let us know your thoughts on the games we talked about and any other thoughts you have on the college football landscape in general. And we'll see you guys next time.